Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are honored that you are here with us today to share a few remembrances and voices from the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame. As you can see, I am a mere man. I am here to introduce these extraordinary women who have made their marks on Alabama's history. Men's names and accomplishments are often more remembered than their female counterpart. Yet women have often contributed equally or more to the human heart and endeavors. Today you will meet women from many parts of our state: Gainesville, Mobile, Florence, Clayton, Montgomery, Livingston, Jasper, Birmingham, and even Marion. Today you will meet the proud, the humble, the brave, the celebrated, and the all but forgotten. Today you will meet the missionary pioneer, the lady gardener, the reformer and teacher, the writer, the dancer, the singer, the actress and celebrity, the adventurer and pilot, the musician and civil rights activist. Our little portraits of these women are but brief moments in colossal lives. So with no further ado, let these ladies begin.
Bada na benya, combo na najia azab, mama wa maputa. In your language, hello, how are you? My name is Vera. I was born to Mary and Jesse on Winston Oak Hill Plantation near Gainesville, Alabama, on July 26, 1838. As some of you may know, what else came along on that day? Yes, this dear old school, making me 175 years old. As a house servant, I spent much of my time with my mistress and the other children. Miss Amanda Winston taught her children and me the Presbyterian religious teaching and told us Bible stories and tales about missionaries in Africa, which left a deep impression on me. After emancipation, my father gave us the surname of our previous owner, Vera. I was 33 years old before I learned to read and write. I worked my way through the Freedmen's School of Talladega to become a teacher. I taught for a number of years in the county schools of Calhoun County. At the age of 56, I applied to work for the Presbyterian missionaries in Africa. They denied me at first, but later they approved me as a self-supporting missionary. In May of 1894, after selling my house and receiving a pledge for $100 from the women of the Congregational Church of Talladega, I paid my own expenses and sailed from New York to the Congo, Zaire. Once reaching shore, I traveled another 12,000 miles inland in a mission station at Lella. The journey lasted almost 2 months. After 2 years of being here, I was finally recognized as a full missionary and began receiving a salary. While in Lella, I learned the Lulu language, which I stated at the beginning of my statement, and assisted in the translation of the Bible. I encouraged Christianity throughout close villages. One of my lasting charities was the creation of the Pentops Home for Girls. This home helped girls who were orphans and those who had been kidnapped and sold into slavery. I used jewels, tools, and even salt to exchange for their freedom. I taught reading, writing, arithmetic, homemaking skills, and gardening, and the belief of the Christian faith. I hope that when and if these girls married, they will spread their principles of good conduct and Christianity to their husband and children. My students nickname me Mama wa Maputa, mother from far away, as a symbol of their love and appreciation. I left a lasting impression on many people, both in Alabama and the Congo. Except for returning to Alabama in 1905 for a speaking tour to raise financial support for the missions, I worked tirelessly for more than 20 years among the children of the Congo. In 1915, I was advised to take a leave absence for health reasons. At the age of 78, I was encouraged to retire. In 1918, I received a Lella Cup, an honor bestowed on me by the Southern Presbyterian Church. After returning to Alabama, I taught at a church, school, and Selma, and later returned to Sumter County, where I died at the age of 99.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Bessie Morris Telegraph, but you all can call me Bessie. It is such an honor to be here today on this great campus. You have a beautiful campus full of an assortment of flowers that have certainly caught my eye. Flowers are a thing of mine, but I'm sure you all knew that. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me begin at the beginning. I was born on May 20th, 1878 in Mobile, Alabama. I am the fifth of 9 children. It is needless to say that we had a house full. It was in 1903 that Walter and his brother William obtained a franchise from the Coca-Cola Company so that they could bottle the product in Montgomery and Mobile, Alabama. However, my dear Walter moved down to Mobile to take over the one-man operation of filling, delivering, and cleaning the bottles. That is how we met. In 1905, I was hired as a stenographer for the Coca-Cola Company in the Mobile area. That is where I met Walter. Walter was charismatic, extremely intelligent, and not to mention very handsome. We were married on November 14th, 1906. I remember it as if it were yesterday. We had the ceremony in our family parlor on Lafayette Street in my hometown. We only had our family and closest friends present, but it was perfect. In 1911, we bought the property of 60 South Ann Street. It was then that my gardening began. 6 years after purchasing South Ann, Walter had the desire to buy and renovate an old fishing camp called Parker Place. That was on Fowl River. He bought the old camp and gave it a new name, Bell Camp. Walter even bought the vacant lot behind South Ann so that I could expand my flower beds and lawns. My garden continued to grow so much that it extended to Bradford Avenue, and we even had to enlarge the garage. I was lucky to have someone that supported my gardening so thoroughly. In 1927, Walter and I took sail to England and Europe. While we were there, I simply fell in love with the architecture of the gardens. It was then that I decided to hire the famous architect, George V. Rogers, to help dress up the gardens at South Ann. While purchasing azaleas for my garden, there was a miscalculation, and we purchased too many. The extra azaleas were taken to Bell Camp to thrive. After this mishap, Walter and I decided to request the assistance of George to help us convert Bell Camp into a garden estate. On February 22nd, 1929, the Azalea Trail was established in Mobile, and our garden at South Ann was the first azalea garden open to the public. In 1932, the Alabama Federation of Women's Club had their annual meeting in Mobile, and we invited them to enjoy Bell Camp. Notice went out that all of Mobile was welcome to see the property the next afternoon, from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 5 o'clock that evening. That Sunday, we had over 4,500 visitors on the grounds, and all roads leading to Mobile were jammed. We even had to call the police to entangle the traffic jam that extended more than 3 miles. It's been open ever since. Walter and I then changed the name of Bell Camp to Bellengrath Gardens. In March of '33, we opened the grounds and charged 50 cents for an admission fee. 2 years later, George began construction on our home on the grounds of Bellengrath Gardens, and our home was completed in '36. It was such a pleasure to have our first meal in our new home on the 4th of July. In that same year, the Mobile Press Register called Bellengrath Gardens the largest rose garden in the South, with over 1,060 roses, including 65 varieties. On February 15, 1943, while on vacation in Hot Springs, Arkansas, I felt a strange pain in my chest and arm. It was hard to breathe, and I began to sweat profusely. It was on that day that I died, at the age of 64, from a sudden heart attack. I left my dear Walter to tend to my garden, and just as he usually did, he never ceased to amaze me with his love for me and support of what I love to do. At the age of 80, Walt began to establish the Bellengrath Morris Foundation to oversee Bellengrath Gardens after his death. Hancock House of Memphis redecorated the Bellengrath home. In 1950, Walter established the Bellengrath Morris Foundation, and charged it with maintaining Bellengrave Gardens and home as a fitting memorial for me. On August 8, 1955, Walter and I were reunited. Even though I'm no longer alive, I still walk the garden from time to time, watching the faces of visitors and seeing their looks of wonder as they look upon my life's work. And that is what I wanted to do most in life, share God's beautiful handiwork with the others around me.
Hello there all. Please, if you may, allow me to introduce myself. I am from a small town in North Alabama. A town not many have heard of. A small, quiet, well at least to me, southern town called Tuscumbia. My parents are Captain Arthur H. and Kate Adams Keller of Tuscumbia. On the 27th of June, 1880, I was born into a colorful, bright, sound-filled world. At the age of 19 months, I became ill and lost my eyesight and hearing. From then on, I lived in a colorless, soundless world. Have you guessed my name yet? Well, in case you haven't, my name is Hellen Keller. I met my lifelong teacher and friend whom has taught me everything about reading and writing and speaking, Miss Ann Sullivan. I proved everyone that I was very intelligent. In 6 months, I knew 625 words. By the time I was just 10 years old, I had mastered Braille and the Emmanuel alphabet. I even learned how to use a typewriter. By the time I was a sweet 16 years old, I could speak well enough to go to prep school and college. In 1904, I graduated with an A.B. cum laude degree from Radcliffe College. I also graduated with degrees from Temple University, University of Glasgow in Scotland, University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, South Africa, University of Delhi, Free University of Berlin, and Harvard University. As you can see, I was a very well-educated woman. I dedicated my life to improving the conditions of the blind and the deafblind around the world. I lectured in more than 25 countries on 5 continents. Everywhere I went, I inspired people. I even wrote a book. It is called The Story of My Life. I wanted to share with everyone all the struggles that came my way in my journey through life. During World War II, I went and visited many injured soldiers who had been injured in the war and lost their sight and helped them cope through. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson awarded me with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest civilian honors. I never did marry anyone, although I was engaged for a short time. His name was Peter Bacon. On June the 1st, 1968, at 3:35 p.m., I drifted off into sleep and died peacefully. I was 87 years old. I was also cremated. I may have lived in darkness, but I lived a very colorful life. If you don't mind, I would like to share a few quotes from my book. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. Be of good cheer. Do not think of today's failures, but of the successes that may come tomorrow. You have set yourselves a difficult task, but you will succeed if you persevere, and you will find a joy in overcoming obstacles. Remember, no effort that we make to attain something beautiful is ever lost.
Greetings, my dear friends and fellow readers. How are you on this wonderful evening? Are any of you strong readers? Do you enjoy reading about the history of Alabama? If your answer is yes, then get ready to be surprised, because I have an interesting story that I think you will enjoy. My name is Lella Warren. I wrote stories, novels, autobiographical essays, and feature stories. My reputation as a writer was built on the success of a single book, The Foundation Stone. The Foundation Stone is a historical novel about a family that settled in Alabama in the frontier period of the 1820s. If you enjoy learning about how Alabama was in the 1820s, then I think this is a book that you will enjoy. I was born and raised in Clayton, Alabama, March 22, 1899. I was the daughter of Benjamin Smart Warren and Lee Ella Underwood. My father was a physician. When I was a young child, I had to move to various places because of my father's job in the United States. There were times that my father could not take us with him on his job. When that happened, my family and I remained at my mother's home in Clayton, Alabama. I spent my whole youth in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. I graduated from Western High School in 1917. In June 1921, I received a baccalaureate degree from George Washington University. After graduating from the university, I met the man of my dreams. His name was John Savannah, and he was an engineer at the time. John and I enjoyed each other's company, and one day we decided to get married, and we did. In December 1922, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and I decided to give her the name Lella. This was one of the greatest moments of my life. Having my own child with the man I love, I don't think nothing could have made me happier. My career began when I decided to publish one of my books. It's called A Touch of Earth. It's a semi-autobiographical novel that was developed from one of the stories that I had written when I was an undergraduate student at George Washington University. My novel was an excellent success, and I knew that by publishing this novel was the first step to becoming a good writer. My greatest joy was having Lella in my life. Having my little girl by my side inspired me to continue to do my best as a writer and a mother. Since John and I became divorced, it became my responsibility to manage my job as a writer and to continue to raise my daughter. I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, but I had faith that I could handle it. In 1936, I married Gerald Breckenridge, who was a journalist. Gerald and I divorced each other in 1940. Then in 1941, I married Well W. Patch, an editor with editorial research reports. My biggest fear was when I found out that I had cancer. When I found out that I had cancer, there were a few things that I was worried about. I was worried about finishing up my last novel. But my main concern was leaving my little girl. I began to work on my second volume of my Alabama trilogy, which was The Whetstone Walls. The Whetstone Walls took me 12 years to finish. I continued writing the story. When the story was finished, I never had a chance to publish it. On March 3rd, 1982, I died from my cancer when I was 83 years old. I have no regrets. I had a wonderful career and a wonderful family. I hope that all readers will enjoy my stories for years to come. It brings me joy that my stories are still being used to this time. That's why I would like to thank Judson College for holding on to my books, and I hope that students of Judson College will enjoy reading them.
Hi there, everyone. Well, aren't you going to greet me? You must know who I am. Well, even if you don't remember me, I'm sure you all remember my husband. I know you must have read at least some of his work, and by default, some of mine as well. You see, for Scott, plagiarism started in the home. Well, I'll just go ahead and tell you all who I am, the one and only Zelda Fitzgerald. Now I'm sure that rings a bell. Born in 1900 in Montgomery, Alabama, gossip rarely passed without mention of me. I smoked, I drank, I danced. Most of all, I had my fun with the boys. Why should life be all work when we all can borrow? Let's think only of today and not worry about tomorrow. That's how I lived. The one thing I enjoyed that was socially acceptable was ballet. How I loved ballet. Anyway, let's get to the part everyone wants to hear about. The day I met Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald. It was the summer of 1918. Tall, handsome, debonair in his military uniform, and positively taken with me, as most of the boys were. The only issue concerning Scott was that there was no way I was going to marry some poor writer. Remarkably, he not only pursued me for 2 years, he managed to survive the war and finish his first novel. It was only after I knew he had published This Side of Paradise that I accepted his proposal. In 1920, we married in New York, with but a few companions present. With the novel's success, Scott and I began the life of any party we went to. Not that there was any party in New York worth going to if we weren't already there. We were on the cover of newspapers, we were famous, we were scandalous, and boy, did we drink. That was one thing we both excelled at. After a while, we left New York, and I had our only child, a girl we named Frances but called Scotty. We went back to New York. Scotty had people to look after her, and I found myself wanting to do something on my own. So I wrote many articles, one of my most famous being Eulogy on the Flapper. What was Scott calling me the first flapper? It seemed more than appropriate. Our marriage was less than picturesque behind the illusion we created. We fought over the fact that he used my diary entries as inspiration for his work. We went into debt, and I even had myself an affair one summer in Paris. On some obscure level, the drama kept us going. When there was none to be found, we would create it. This did nothing to fix matters, though, and it became overwhelming. I went back to ballet, despite the fact that Scott derided my endeavor. I would practice from sunup till sundown, exhausting myself. I came to realize, though, I had returned to ballet too late. I was regrettably nearing 30, and no amount of labor could reverse the hands of time. Scott and I were still the golden couple of New York, but our facade was cracking amongst those closest to us. After a near suicide, I was admitted to a sanitarium, where I was diagnosed as schizophrenic. While in psychiatric centers, I wrote my first and only novel, Save Me the Waltz. I knew even before I finished it that Scott would be furious. The novel was our lives with the characters having different names. I published it anyway, and the critics hated it, and Scott couldn't be happier at his lack of success. It was completely crushing, and out of a need to do something, be someone, I turned to painting. Out of a spur-of-the-moment frenzy like that of our youth, we went on a ridiculous trip to Cuba, which ended up beyond disastrous. When we returned home, Scott ended up having to be hospitalized from being so alcohol-ridden and exhausted. And that was the last time I ever saw Mr. S. Scott Fitzgerald. After Scott recovered, he tried desperately to reclaim some of his former success, working in Hollywood, while I remained at a hospital in Alabama. Yet, somehow through the distance, we managed to reconnect. We write her long, lengthy letters like that of our courtship all those years ago. This proved not to last. On December 21st, 1940, Scott's body finally surrendered from the years of self-inflicted abuse, and he died. I didn't attend his funeral. With Scott's death, I began to write again. It was as if my husband's literary prowess had taken over my body. Yet just as my mind was thriving, my condition was worsening. I was in and out of the hospital constantly, receiving treatment after treatment. On what was meant to be a normal March day, I'd gone back for yet another treatment. As I was waiting, I began to notice smoke coming from my doorway. I ignored it until that vicious crackling sound came closer. I rushed to the door, but it had been locked. To my absolute horror, panic set in me, and as the flames devoured the walls, I screamed with every ounce of life I had in me. I struggled, but the fire was unconquerable, and through the agonizing pain and terror of it all, my life ended at 48 years old. Well, I hope that wasn't too dismal a tale for you all, but it was my life, full of some of the best and a bit of the worst the world had to offer. Yet in death, I want both the darker and lighter shades that colored my life to be remembered, for both were what made me the Zelda Fitzgerald.
Hello everyone, my name is AWHOF, and most of you might know me as Vera Hall. I was born in 1902 in Paynesville, Alabama. I was known for establishing one of the most stunning bodies of American folk music on record. In 1917, I married naturally, a coal miner, and later gave birth to our beautiful and only child, Minnie Ada. Shortly after her birth, my husband was killed, leaving me to raise Minnie all by myself. Though I began singing early in my life, I wasn't recognized until the late 1930s by John Lomax. He was an American teacher and folklorist who did much of the presentation of American folk songs. John Lomax was the first person to ever recognize my talents, and he put them to use by recording me for the Library of Congress. Even though I was new to recording business, John told me that I had one of the loveliest voices he had ever heard, making me believe that I could do pretty much anything I wanted. In 1943, my recording of Another Man Done Gone was heard worldwide. The Library of Congress also played my song for their 75th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. A couple years after the song was released, I had the opportunity to perform it in New York for the American Music Festival at Columbia University. Another man done gone, another man done gone, another man done gone down to New Orleans. Okay. You're not here to listen to me sing, so I'll get right back to my story. Throughout my trip, Lomas interviewed me about many situations that I went through. The interview was later turned into a book in 1959. In his book, Lomas stated, "My singing is like a deep voiced shepherd's flute, mellow and pure in tune, yet always with hints of lips and pleasure of love and flesh. These sounds come from deep within me when I sing, from a source of gold and light, otherwise hidden, and falls directly upon your ear like sunlight. It is a liquid with rich and low overtones that it keeps leak directly into falsetto and play there as effortlessly as a bird in the wind." On January 29, 1964, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I died at the age of 62. Even though I am no longer here, my work still brings in attention. My voice can still be heard on other artists' songs, making me now known in different generations. My masterful versions of traditional songs and stories are a defining part of Southern Black culture in the Black Belt region.
Hello, darlings. I'm going to make this quick because I'm in need of a cigarette, but they told me I couldn't smoke in here. I'm sure many of you know who I am, but for those of you who do not, I am Tallulah Bankhead. I come from one of the most notable families in Alabama. My grandfather was a United States Senator, and my father was Speaker of the House of Representatives. But enough about them, let's talk about me. I was born in Huntsville, Alabama on January 31st, 1902. My mother died 3 weeks after I was born. Even as she was dying, she told my aunt to watch over my older sister, but that I would always take care of myself. She was a wise woman. My father did not know how to handle my exuberant personality and thought I needed an attitude adjustment, so he sent me and my sister to convent schools. Little did he know that he only fueled my desire to gain attention in any way that I could. At the age of 15, I entered a contest that was in the magazine Picture Play. I was among the winners and had the opportunity to move to New York so I could appear on Who Loved Him Best. During my time in New York with my aunt, I grew very annoyed with her strict rules, and I rejoiced the day she left. After she left, I went wild. I moved in with fellow actress Bijou Martin. She threw the wildest parties. It was there that I was introduced to cocaine and marijuana. It was also during this time in my life that I began collecting my ever-famous animals. I collected animals of all sorts, not only of the male variety. I collected anything and everything that struck my fancy. In 1923, I moved to London to be the star of The Dancers. I was absolutely magnificent. I even acquired my own cult that was given the name Gallery Girls. I would greet them after every show with a high dollar. They loved me, and it's easy to see why. I stayed in London for 8 years and then received a proposal to join Paramount Studios. This was too good of a deal to pass up, so I agreed without a second thought. However, before I left, I threw a huge party to say goodbye to all my English friends. I then sailed back to New York in 1931 and signed a contract with Paramount. This was the biggest move in my career. I made many films while working with Paramount. However, things began to change when in 1932, the managers invented the production code, which restricted what the studio could show and how us actors had to behave on stage as well as off stage. I was outraged. No one told Tallulah Bankhead what to do. I finished my last film, Faithless, with Paramount, but I told them that I would not be renewing my contract. I married fellow actor John Emery in 1939. Our marriage didn't work out, so we called it quits in 1941 and were divorced that same year. I performed and appeared in many movies, TV shows, and talk shows. My most famous was Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat in 1943. I became so famous that in 1957 I appeared on the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour show as myself in an episode called The Celebrity Next Door. I still continue to act because what would the world watch without me? My last TV appearance was on The Tonight Show on May 14, 1966, where I chatted about baseball with Paul McCartney and John Lennon. They were absolutely divine. I stayed with my sister during the summer of '68, only to find out that Eugenia still got on my nerves. I did, however, have a routine of watching my soaps all day and playing bridge at night. No matter how much my sister annoyed me, I confessed to her one evening that I didn't care about anything anymore and prayed every night that I wouldn't wake up. I contracted the Asian flu, and my health declined due to the fact that the antibiotics were of no effect. I left my estate to my sister and her husband. While in the hospital, I contracted pneumonia and slipped into a coma. But before I left consciousness, I told them that I wanted codeine and bourbon. I was placed in intensive care where I died on December 12, 1968, at the age of 66. I may be gone, but my legacy still remains within my movies.
If there's one thing I never let myself forget, not for as long as I lived, it was to always do what I loved, and to do all the things that I loved. I was a high school cheerleader, student leader, wife, mother, politician, businesswoman, and my favorite of them all, aviatrix. I was born Nancy Batson in Birmingham, Alabama in 1920. It was right as I was growing up that the popularity of pilots swelled, and my life was forever changed when, at 7 years old, I saw Mr. Lindbergh fly for the first time. It seemed absolutely magical to me, my neck straining and my eyes squinting up at the sky, to see a man somehow control a flying machine. It was all I could talk of for weeks on end, driving my 4 brothers and sisters crazy. Needless to say, as I went through school and eventually went to the University of Alabama, I had flying on the brain. Finally, at the age of 19, I got a chance. I became 1 out of 5 women to be chosen for civilian flight training. It took me a year to get my private pilot's license, and 2 years after that to get my commercial. Later that same year, I had the privilege and honor to become one of the members of the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron, WAFs for short, during the Second World War. We performed stateside missions, shuttling P-38, P-47, and P-51 aircraft between their factories, staging areas, maintenance sites, and training sites. It was wonderful serving my country, and the friendship formed between all the girls will last for decades to come. After the war, we were all discharged, but I didn't mind too much. I was still young, in my 20s, and I had my college sweetheart to go home to and marry. Paul Cruz and I raised our 3 children, Bradford, Little Paul, and Darling Jane, in California City, California. After they all started to go to school and were out of the house for the majority of the day, I felt that itch to fly again. Paul didn't mind as long as the children were still cared for, and the kids loved it. I still remember when my youngest first saw me fly. So I started to fly in derbies and bought my own Mooney Mite airplane. After a few years, I even managed to open my own flight service in California. Sooner than I wished it, we lost Paul. His health hadn't been the best for the past few months, but we had both convinced ourselves there was nothing to worry about. On a brisk winter day in 1978, we were proved wrong. After Paul passed, I refused to mope around, and I kept myself busy. I served as California City Mayor for 1 term, went back to Birmingham where I built and sold houses on the property my father had left me, and I served 1 term as St. Clair County Airport Commissioner. In 1989, I became the first woman to be inducted into the Alabama Aviation Hall of Fame. At 79 years old, I was surprised when I was offered the chance to co-pilot a corporate King Air twin-engine turbojet, but I readily accepted. I passed all my necessary prerequisites, and I was able to fly for nearly a year, until a bit after my 80th birthday. Doctors soon discovered that I contracted cancer, so that was my last flight. I didn't mind though. I had more than a lifetime worth of adventure. Less than a year later, my illness took my life at the age of 81. My message to all of you is simple. Live out every dream you possibly have. You never know where one might take you.
Well, hello there. My name is Nina Miglionico. I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. I am the daughter to Italian immigrants. I grew up working in the family delicatessen and learning to play the piano. I graduated high school from Woodlawn High. I completed my undergrad at Stanford University in Homewood. I received my law degree from the University of Alabama. I became one of the first women lawyers in Alabama to start my own practice. I had to handle criminal cases in order to build up my own practice. It wasn't easy. I was an active member in the American Association of University Women. I served as president of the Alabama Merit System League, the Alabama Federation of Business and Professional Women's Clubs, and the Alabama Association of Women Lawyers. I have worked hard my whole life and dedicated a lot of my time to my profession. I supported women's and civil rights, which led to acts of torment. In the spring of 1965, my father discovered a bomb consisting of 38 sticks of dynamite on the front porch of our home on Essex Road, which did not explode. In late 1974, my front yard was defaced by burning crosses. I served on the Birmingham City Council for 22 years. I hold the title of being the longest practicing female attorney in the history of Alabama. I practiced for 73 years. I was one of the original board members of the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame. In 1996, I was recognized by the ABA as one of the most outstanding women lawyers in America that year. I was still practicing at the time of my death. I was senior partner in the Miglionico and Reward firm. I died May 26, 2009 at Trinity Medical Center due to falling at home. I am buried in Elmwood Cemetery. I was 95 years old.
Good evening, my Christian brothers and sisters. Isn't it good that we have the Lord watching over us and that we continue to worship Him every day? I know because the Lord has been good to me. The Lord helped me to overcome the pain of losing my husband. But there are times that I miss him, and I know that my children miss him too. I even wish that I could turn back the hands of time and prevent my husband's death. Hello, my name is Coretta Scott King. I was born in North Perry County in Alabama on April 27, 1927. I was raised on a cotton farm with my parents, Bernice McMurray Scott and Obadiah Scott in Perry County. My siblings' names were Edith and Obadiah Leonard. Education was a huge deal for my family because my parents wanted my siblings and me to get a good education so that we can have good jobs. Who can blame them? All parents want their children to have a good education, good jobs, and have a good life. I thank my parents for what they did. I'm glad that my parents gave me and my siblings the push that we need for getting our education. I excelled in music, playing both the trumpet and piano, singing in the choir, and participating in school musicals when I was in school. I graduated as class valedictorian in 1945. After I graduated from high school, I decided to leave the South and attend the Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. I still continued my education at Boston's New England Conservatory of Music, and I earned a degree for both voice and violin. In Boston, I experienced something that I never thought was possible. I fell in love with this handsome doctorate student in theology at Boston University. His name was Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a bright and intelligent person. Martin and I always spent a lot of time together. One day, Martin and I decided to get married. After Martin and I were married, we decided to return to Boston, where I had earned my bachelor's degree in voice, and my husband became minister of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery in 1954. This was a proud moment for both of us, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Martin and I had 4 beautiful children: Yolanda Denise in 1955, Martin Luther III 2 years later, Dexter Scott in 1961, and Bernice Albertine in 1963. My greatest joy is my family. I had many responsibilities as a pastor's wife, balancing and raising my children, and maintaining our home while participating in the civil rights protests along with my husband. My husband's goal was to bring our whole nation together as one. At the time, people didn't understand what it needed to become one together. Who could blame them? The only thing they would go by is what they have been taught from generation to generation. My husband wanted to clear that up because he knew that no one had to continue to be that way. He wanted to help guide us in the right direction. My biggest fear was the loss of my husband, Martin Luther King Jr. He was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968. For someone to shoot my husband must mean that no one was ready to accept change. Change was indeed a scary and hard thing. But my husband and I believe that changing can help our community. What worried me the most was how to tell my children that their father won't be coming home for a long time. Every time I look at my children, I wonder how they feel about their father was killed. Since I am the only one left to participate in the civil rights movement, I had to continue on for my husband's sake. Continuing this movement was part of my husband's dream. His dream and my dream were one and the same. We wanted our children to be treated fairly and have the right to do this and that. My husband and I didn't want our children to grow up in a world where whites and black women fought about unnecessary things. I'll do anything to make my husband's dream come true. Martin's dream is a dream where whites and blacks can come together as equals. When I was 79 years old, I died on January 3rd, 2006. The cause of my death was cancer. My body was carried by a horse-drawn carriage, and my funeral was held at the New Birth Missionary Church in Lithonia, Georgia. President George W. Bush and former Presidents Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton attended my funeral. It made me happy that they attended. It brings me great joy that all the students on the Judson College campus are treated fairly and are treated as equals. I would like to thank Judson College for giving me and my fellow sisters this chance to share our stories with you.